They said the shot was impossible, 4,000 meters, farther than any sniper on record had ever dared to claim. 13 elite snipers tried. 13 elite snipers failed. Pride cracked, tempers rose, and hope dissolved into the cold wind rolling over the desert. And then, from the very back of the crowd, where no one had bothered to look, a quiet voice drifted forward. "Let me do it." Every head turned. No one expected a woman to speak. No one expected a Navy SEAL. And definitely, no one expected her to succeed. The sun sagged low over the Nevada training grounds, baking the sand into a shimmer that distorted everything it touched. Dust clung to faces, gear, and the heavy silence that settled after the 13th sniper stood up, shaking his head, admitting defeat. The target, a steel plate barely wider than a man's shoulders, stood a staggering 4,000 meters away. It was a distance so unreal that even the most decorated veterans whispered that it bordered on impossible. Colonel Briggs, a man whose scars told more stories than his mouth ever would, paced behind the shooting bench. His boots crunched on the sand like grinding teeth. He wasn't angry, he was disappointed, and somehow that was worse. The Pentagon observers behind him exchanged confused looks. They were running out of time, patience, and explanations. If this test failed, everything, funding, research, careers, evaporated. 4,000 meters, Briggs murmured. And not one damn hit. "Sir, the wind shear is." "I know what the wind shear is," Briggs cut in. "I also know we have 13 of the world's best marksmen here who can't solve it." Nearby, the snipers gathered in a loose semicircle, each wearing the same expression, frustration mixed with the sting of wounded pride. They were the best, after all, recon Marines, Rangers, Delta, SAS. They'd made shots that civilians bragged about in online forums as legends. But today, the desert mocked them. And then there was her standing several paces behind everyone else, hands folded behind her back, quiet enough to blend into the heat haze. Lieutenant Mara Hale. Navy SEAL. Silent Shadow. A woman whose file was thick with commendations yet overshadowed by the lack of recognition that came with quiet excellence. Most in the group didn't know her name. Some assumed she was support staff. Others simply overlooked her. Mara didn't mind. Being unseen made it easier to watch. She had studied every attempt, the timing, the breathing, the adjustments, the mistakes. Not with arrogance, but with hunger. There was something in the challenge that spoke to a part of her she rarely let breathe. A whisper inside her ribs. A need to prove, not to them, but to herself, that she belonged. Briggs rubbed his temples. "We might have to call it. At this point." "Sir." Her voice came like a breeze, soft, but crisp enough to slice the tension. Everyone turned. The group blinked in unison, like a single organism stunned by the fact that the quiet SEAL they'd barely noticed had spoken. Mara stepped forward, boots steady but heartbeat not. "Let me try." Somebody scoffed. Another muttered, "You gotta be kidding." But Briggs, he just studied her. Really studied her. There was something in her stance, calm, grounded, resolute. "You think you can do what 13 elite shooters just failed at?" he asked. Her eyes didn't waver. "I think I can try." Briggs exhaled slowly. "Then show me." She approached the bench. The world seemed to narrow around her, not out of nerves, but focus. She adjusted the rifle with movements that were almost tender. Fingers brushed the metal like a pianist greeting familiar keys. Behind her, one of the snipers whispered, "What's she doing?" Another muttered, "Does she even have the strength for the recoil at this distance?" Mara ignored all of it. She had learned long ago that the world loved to judge, but judgment had never pulled a trigger. Discipline did. And she had that in her bones. She lowered herself to the ground. Pressed her cheek to the stock. Slow breath in. Slower breath out. Her heartbeat slowed until it felt like someone else's. The wind gusted, but she watched it, not fighting it, not resisting. Understanding it. This wasn't a battle. It was a conversation. The world went silent. And she exhaled. "But we won't fire the shot yet, not here." This moment wasn't about pulling the trigger. It was about every eye on the range waiting to see if the person they least expected could do what no one else could. And for the first time in her life, Mara wasn't afraid of being seen. She was ready. Everything froze. The desert. The team. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as Mara aligned her soul with the rifle. Colonel Briggs stood behind her, arms folded, watching with the kind of intensity that could crush stone. The observers murmured among themselves, unsure if they should take notes or prepare for disappointment. Mara adjusted her scope, dialing in not just for distance but for the strange, unpredictable crosswinds that danced over the desert. She had spent the last hour watching the patterns, memorizing the rhythm like studying the tide. She accounted for humidity, heat shimmer, even the slight angle of the earth. She whispered to herself, a habit from deployments where silence was survival. Don't fight the wind. Borrow it. For a long heartbeat, the world existed only inside her scope. Behind her, one of the snipers whispered, "She's taking too long." Another countered, "Or she's the only one not rushing." The desert exhaled. Mara inhaled. And then she squeezed the trigger. The recoil punched back, but she absorbed it like water absorbing a stone. The bullet tore forward, slicing through the air, vanishing into the shimmer. Seconds passed. Then more seconds. Too many seconds. Someone muttered, "She missed." But then. Ping. A faint sound at first, almost like someone flicking a coin. Then louder in the silence. Echoing. Growing. The distant steel target vibrated under the impact of a bullet that had traveled farther than any shot any of them had ever witnessed. Even the wind seemed stunned. Mara didn't smile. But her eyes softened with something close to relief. Or maybe release. The men around her gaped. Some cursed softly. Others laughed in disbelief, hands running through their hair, trying to process what they had just seen. The 13th sniper whispered, "Holy hell, she did it." Briggs stepped forward slowly, like approaching a miracle he wasn't sure was real. "Lieutenant Hale," he said, voice thick with awe, "that was." But he stopped when he saw her expression. She wasn't triumphant. She wasn't basking in their shock. She was just still. Content. At peace with the shot. "I watched the win longer," she said simply. That was the difference. But Briggs shook his head. "No. You were the difference." Word of her shot traveled fast. But what hit the team harder wasn't the fact that she succeeded, it was the way she did it. Calm. Patient. Silent confidence instead of boastful ego. The Pentagon officials approached her with wide eyes and excited whispers. Papers shuffled. Cameras clicked. But Mara stepped away from all of it. She wasn't here for fame. She wasn't here for applause. She came because she believed she could do what others couldn't if only someone gave her the chance to try. Later that night, as the team sat around the dim glow of camp lanterns, the 13th sniper approached her. This time, his expression wasn't frustration or disbelief. It was respect. "How'd you stay so calm out there?" he asked. Mara looked at the stars, high, distant, impossible to reach but still shining. "Because," she said softly, "I wasn't trying to prove them wrong. I was proving to myself that I still had something left to give." Silence settled, not awkward, but warm. A silence of understanding. The impossible shot wasn't about distance. It was about courage. Courage to step forward when no one calls your name. Courage to speak when you're overlooked. Courage to try when 13 before you fail. And as the night deepened and the desert winds cooled, every person who had doubted her now carried the same thought. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who's been preparing their whole life for the moment no one else can handle.